Every Wednesday during the football season, we'll be doing basketball. Cerruti loves that I offered up Hump Hoops. I don't love the title, but he really does. So who knows? We may stay with that. So here's what we have. And even when we don't want to do it, we're going to give it to you. Best inbounders of the 90s. We'll tear you to death. Who knows? We'll come up with something. But let's start in Denver last night. Big time crowd, ring celebration, raising the banner. If you've never done it before, it's going to be an unbelievable feeling. You know, some of the other franchises have had a few, start to take it for granted a little bit. To finally get one, to have been in the playoffs as many times as Denver had and not made the final trip through the whole thing and winning a title, it's really cool for a fan base. That's awesome. So it's a weird rivalry, and I don't know if it's me getting older or if I'm missing something with it or the recency of it or just the Lakers factor, because whenever the Lakers or LeBron with the Lakers is involved in the story, it's all going to get cranked up a little bit more. But I don't really understand the pettiness, even though pro athletes need almost no motivation to get petty now. You know, baseball players are always the king of this stuff where they would find a way to get mad about, like baseball players to me, the job is baseball, and then it's also to find ways to get incredibly incomprehensible mad about the dumbest shit ever. And I think the NBA guys, I don't know that baseball players can be caught in that department, but NBA players, especially the ones that we talk about a lot, can find ways to be disrespected in ways that none of us ever really see. So when it comes to Lakers Nuggets, they've only played each other twice in these forms in the playoffs. So there's not like a ton of history there. And the Lakers deserve all the credit in the world for even making it to the Western Conference Finals. And you think about, you know, I really do think 3 years from now, not that we're going to spend a lot of time on the 23 Lakers, but be like, that's pretty miraculous what they were able to do to turn that thing around. A lot of it has to do with if Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis, then they're an entirely different basketball team, which we'll get to here briefly. But it's a little weird that I guess it's not shocking that Denver would want to go at LA. It felt a bit more driven by Malone and some of his comments. And then you get the Nuggets chanting, "Who's your daddy?" there at the end. So that's the one side of it. But then on the other side, the part maybe that I have the harder time with is the Lakers feeling as if they're above any of this, as if like it's sacrilegious to even suggest anything negative. And LeBron plays into it a bit, and then everybody's making fun of Anthony Davis because he didn't score in the second half, and for saying that he and LeBron had conversations about all the talking that the Nuggets were doing. So good. I hope it's nasty. I like nasty stuff in the NBA. I want teams to not like each other. I want players to not like each other. And I don't know that we even really have this right now, but it's kind of playing out there a bit. But it's not like it was some 7-game series that they've been facing each other in the Western Conference Finals multiple times in the last handful of seasons. As far as the gameplay, pretty high level stuff. And that's because, at least on the Denver side of things, they know exactly who they are. When you're looking at all the contenders and you're trying to figure out, okay, is this going to work? How's this going to fit? And all this stuff. Denver doesn't have to do any of that stuff. All they have to do is figure out how they're going to figure the bench minutes out of Bruce Brown. And Bruce Brown with the Nuggets is better with them than he would be with any other team because of Jokic. And I'll get to some of the bench stuff here in a second, but it's an unbelievable, it's going to be an unbelievable feeling if you're the coaching staff, you're the front office, and you're all the players. And you're like, we know exactly what to do. We know who we are, and we're still in our primes. And so there is a gap. Whatever you think about the West and how it's all going to play out, like I think most of us would figure there's a gap before it, and we see it play out last night. So nothing was all that shocking. When I look at Jokic and go, okay, well, who guards him? Well, Anthony Davis can't guard him. And it felt like for a while there, Jokic couldn't really guard Anthony Davis either, but it was more of a team effort later in the second half, which we'll get to. But whenever I was trying to go, all right, what am I going to do in the finals? Well, I'll put Denver in again, even though I have a slight sliver of hope for Phoenix. I still would have been surprised, I think, if it were the Lakers. And then on the other side, you know, as much as I didn't really want to go chalk with it, you know, getting weird with picks like it's the NCAA tournament bracket in your office pool. All right, it's Milwaukee or it's Boston. That's the way it feels right now. And so even if it were, say, Boston, okay, and I'll do my picks here later in the segment. If it's Boston, I was like, would I pick Boston to win the whole thing? I don't think I've picked Boston to win the whole thing in like 13 or 14 years. So I was like, maybe I'll just do it again. I think they're going to be really good. But at the end of the year, if it's Boston and Denver in the finals, like who's guarding Jokic? Is that guy even on the Celtics roster right now? Because I don't know what Porzingis is going to look like at the end of the year. Horford hit a wall, it felt like, last season. What they got from Horford last year was incredible for the entire season. But even in the playoffs, you're like, okay, yeah, Horford now, but are they pacing him the entire time to be facing Jokic in late June? I mean, could you even do that? So I don't know what anybody does with Jokic, because even if he's not scoring, he's completely controlling the game. He's the best closer in the NBA. He's Mariano Rivera. Last night, looking at the score, the Lakers get back into it after being down big early, which is to be expected. It's 90-94. At 8:49, Jokic is at the scorer's table. And honestly, he was sent to the scorer's table prior to a few possessions playing out. And I would always think, like, look, if you have 4 timeouts and you have the best player in the world over there on the scorer's table, like, you could lose 3 offensive possessions with him watching. Like, wouldn't it make sense to just burn the timeout to get him in there earlier? And it's like, nah, we don't care. It'll be fine. And that's exactly what happens. He checks in. Denver goes on a 25-17 run to close the game. And it doesn't really feel that close at the end, even though there were moments where it was happening. As far as the bench, the Lakers have a handful of guys I don't like. Not breaking news. Jackson Hayes, athletic, whatever. Don't think he's ever going to figure it out. I know all these contracts are cheap and they're trying to put together the roster. And some of the names that we saw even playing or in the box score this morning aren't even going to be factors. So who really cares? But, Cam Reddish, whatever. Christian Wood, whatever. I mean, Lakers fans, I'm telling you right now, once he gets the ball, nobody gets it back. And the thing is you will trick yourself into thinking he's pretty good, as the previous 10 teams in the last decade have. So I guess it's 9, now 10. But once the possession is with him, the possession is over. And the thing is, he's good enough offensively for him to justify going ahead and doing those things. But good luck with it. And so that's, what do we got? Reddish, Hayes, and then Wood. And then, look, D'Angelo Russell, who's starting at point guard, I thought was a disaster last night. I thought those possessions with him were just terrible. Defensive effort, a little bit better. But he did get lost late when they were running that 2-man game with Jokic and Murray, where they screen Murray's guy, and then he has to make a decision as Jokic is sitting there, not even facing the basket, actually facing out to the three-point line, just waiting for what kind of cut Murray is going to make. And Russell got lost on one of those, and then it was pre-switched another time, or I think it was pre-switched just because of transition matchup. So it wasn't even by design, really. But look, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on him. I thought he had a really bad game last night, and I don't know if you're an NBA Finals team, if he's running that many of your possessions. LeBron was limited minutes-wise, 29 minutes last night, and that apparently is the plan. He said at one point he was like, I'm just going to follow what they tell me to do, but obviously everybody knows that he's consulted on this, and then Ham said that he was, and then LeBron was like, look, this is what we've all talked about. But the thing that sucks for him is he kind of has to pretend like, no way, I want to be out there every single minute. The fact that he's still driving with this much force is incredible. He was 10 of 16 last night, wasn't actually settling from 3. He's also doing something I'm noticing on these drives where he's sticking the ball right in your face, which isn't exactly new, but it's really effective because you end up fouling him even more. It's not the Eric Gordon drive with that right elbow, the Muay Thai elbow out into your sternum, and then Gordon flails and it still kind of works, or Gordon will get the call. We saw it a couple times in the second game. But LeBron's drives were really like just forceful. And that's the thing, when you get older, you usually just start settling. And he didn't do that last night. He actually led all scorers. The Anthony Davis part of it is a little frustrating because he was so good in the first half. And like I said, like Jokic couldn't really do anything with him. I thought Denver defended him better as a team in the second half. He only took 1 shot in the fourth quarter, and that was a 3. That's the part with Anthony Davis where it's like, don't let everything take you out of your game. And I know that's a balance between, that's a bad shot, you forced it. I'd rather have a few forced bad shots, think Kevin Durant, than I would, well, I guess I'm just not going to get any shots up here at all. But there's just really nothing to do with Jokic. And when you look at Denver's bench here, Christian Brown's going to be even better. That left-handed finish that he had against Wood up against the glass was incredible. Najee's one of their big rotation guys now. Peyton Watson's coming in playing defense, and Reggie Jackson had 24 minutes. As far as the 3 rookies, Hunter Tyson, who I actually like, didn't play. He was kind of good in the combine. Pickett didn't play. I think technically he had 1 minute when they subbed out all the starters there. And then Strother, who was the leading scorer for them during the preseason, 18 a game, 45% on threes. He had only 2 turnovers. He didn't play. Welcome to Mike Malone, boys, because you're not going to play if he doesn't think you're ready. So I don't know that they're going to be developing all these guys on the fly, but that bench that everybody kind of liked, being like, oh, there's a couple rotation guys in there, they didn't even get to play. So that's how I feel about game 1. Nothing crazy, no grand conclusions, because there shouldn't be. So let's get to the second game. The biggest thing with Phoenix at Golden State that I was watching is I wanted to see how the Curry, Chris Paul minutes were staggered. And boy, were they staggered. No Draymond Green, no Beal. So again, not a ton of conclusions on this one. Because as much as you know how much I love Chris Paul and I've loved this Warriors team, from a basketball standpoint, the styles of play are not a fit. But it's up to Chris Paul to figure out how to fit in. And it was funny because in the beginning, I'd see Steph bring the ball across half court at the start of the game. And then I think that lasted a few possessions. And then Chris Paul was like, well, now I'm going to do it a little bit. Because basketball is very much a lot like a lot of things in life, is that you can kind of pretend that you're something that you're not, but ultimately all of us kind of default to what we are and what we're most comfortable with. Basketball is probably one of the hardest things to change, even the smartest players. But I've seen Chris Paul play off the ball enough, especially back in the Houston Harden thing, where I think it can kind of work. But I love the bench minutes with Chris Paul. I just am not sure how the Curry Chris Paul thing matches up minutes wise. So I went through all the minute substitution stuff with both of them, and they're both in to start the game. Chris Paul's the first sub out at 7:05, and that's Kuminga coming in for him. Then Chris Paul comes in for Curry to close the first quarter at 3:07. Curry came in for a last possession at 26 seconds. At the start of the second quarter, Gary Payton's in for Curry. And then Curry comes in for Chris Paul, who started the second quarter. And then Chris Paul came back in, and they closed the quarter together for the final 3:57. Start of the second half, they're both in. Curry comes out at 7:21. Then he comes back in at 2:53 for Chris Paul. Fourth quarter, Paul's on the bench. Steph's starting. Chris Paul comes in for Steph. Then at 5:22 of the fourth quarter, Steph comes in for Chris Paul. Then they close together at 3:21. Curry's foul trouble alone screwed up probably whatever the normal plan was. But of the minutes they played, Chris Paul actually played 34 total minutes. Steph played 31. Again, the foul trouble. So that was 15 minutes and 26 seconds. I'm probably off by a few seconds here or there, but I did the math this morning. General idea is about 15 and a half minutes where they played together. I don't know if it'd be more or less depending on the foul trouble stuff there. And there are some late possessions that I wanted to just jump in towards here where, last few minutes of the game, there's a Chris Paul drive where he's kind of trying to figure it out, and Curry's watching it. And Curry then gets the pass late, and he's left to ISO, a missed, just really tough end of the shot clock contested three. Then they try to switch it up where they were going to try to do something, and Chris Paul ends up driving, and it wasn't a bailout pass to Curry. Curry then to Looney. It was a turnover. Then they ran something with Clay and Kuminga. That was the defensive assignment there. The next time through ended up being Chris Paul missing a three. They got an offensive rebound. And he was over on the break. So I just was seeing things where I'm like, Steph watching somebody else, big possessions is not what this team is. And, we could say one game 1,000 different times today if we want to, and we'd be right doing it. But I think I know some players pretty well. And I love the Chris Paul bench things. I just wonder how long they'll go. And it depends, too, on defensive assignment stuff. Because say Beal is playing last night, right? So KD was in and Clay had him late. Kuminga was on Booker. They also had the Gary Payton option with that. But if it's Beal, Booker, and then KD, and then Clay is playing KD, what are you doing? If this is a playoff series, what are you doing defensively there? I guess you could move Clay down to Booker, but I don't think you want to do that now at this stage of Clay's career and then put Draymond and Durant. And then it's do you want to be small? Because I thought one of the best things for Phoenix last night was that their centers were so active. Nurkic was a beast setting screens and rolling consistently against a small front line. Whether it was Clay or Kuminga playing power forward or Andrew Wiggins, depending, Wiggins throws in another option there defensively as well, as I'm playing this all out in my head. But the point keeps coming back to how would you have Paul and Steph close defensively against bigger perimeter guys? And maybe they figure it all out, but I think the staggering tells us where their head is at with this organization as far as what the plan is. Is they were telling us game one they're going to try to stagger these guys. So the only thing left on this is that Booker was the best player on the floor. He was the best player on the floor. The guy is fiercer than almost every other perimeter player in the league. I've really fallen in love with him the last couple seasons. And he hits a huge three late. And then the final three possessions, he's got Okogie, who was terrific energy-wise, hits a huge three. He's got Eric Gordon, who hits a three. And then what I thought was really fitting because of how hard Nurkic played last night, the rolling, the rebounding. Now, he's going to get work if he gets switched into a small guy. And the few times that Steph and Chris Paul got that opportunity, they were taking it every single time. So that part defensively scares me a little bit. I know there's this idea that Nurkic can defend Jokic. No one can. But, obviously you can try to make it harder on him. But for the Suns to close the game last night with Nurkic on this hard roll catch off another Booker thing where Booker was just kind of doing it on his own. Let's close with another, hey, it's one game, stop point here. I got to be honest with you, the KD stuff looked a lot like the end of last year, and that's not a compliment. He's going to get his points, but it felt like the shots, and, they were physical with him last night, but it felt like the shot profile was kind of ISO. This usually goes in, even though it's not a great look because he's so special as a player. But whether it was the falling down all the time at the end of last year against Denver while Denver's running away in transition as he's trying to get a call, it just didn't necessarily feel in the flow, even if I liked overall that Phoenix seemed like they had a plan, which is getting those centers involved against whatever Golden State was going to try to do with them. And then Booker just takes over. So there you go, 2 games in. Awards. Well, let's do this. I'll do the Final Four first. I've got Denver over Phoenix. I've got Boston over Milwaukee. I have Denver over Boston. I just don't know if the person on Boston right now that's supposed to impede the Jokic stuff in an NBA Finals is even on the roster. And if you're telling me it's Porzingis and Horford, I just don't think it's going to be enough unless the rest of the other parts where you're like, well, Denver doesn't have the wing guys to hang with Tatum, Drew, and Brown, and Drew can guard Murray, and they can throw this at Murray, and they can try to throw. All right, whatever. We're talking like June, all right? But as of now, Jokic feels like the most unsolvable problem in the NBA for the rest of the teams. MVP, Jokic, he's the favorite on FanDuel, plus 430 as of this morning. If you want to do something that's a little non-chalk, I like Booker, who's 6th with Curry. They're both plus 1,400. Rookie of the year, Wembanyama, whatever, going chalk on that one. I just think he's going to have a ton of moments. You're like, oh, this isn't that exciting. Yeah, that's why I don't really do the award stuff all that much. And Coach of the Year, does anyone actually care? Here's 2 stats for you on Coach of the Year. The last, I don't know, however many we want to run through this. If we look at Coach of the Year, last year was Mike Brown. The year before that, Monty Williams gone. Before that, Tibbs, Knicks, still there. Before that, Nurse gone, Budenholzer gone, Casey gone, D'Antoni gone, and then Kerr's the last repeater. We have to go back 8 years. And when it comes to coaches, 20 of the 30 have been hired in 2020 or sooner in their jobs. If you want to get fired, win Coach of the Year. Spo should just get it at some point, but I don't know. We don't seem to do that. Whenever I'm trying to project the award stuff, I'll think what would the writers like? What story would the writers like? And it's not all classic writers as much as it used to be. This is my 3rd year with a vote, but you could see a little correction stuff after Jokic's finals run last year. And Coach of the Year always seems to be the team we expected nothing from, as opposed to the person that just is the best at the job. And, for me, that's Spo, and that's probably not going to change until the guy retires.